for joining us for an episode of All About PR. If you're tuning in for the first time, on this podcast, we speak to experts from the field of PR and communication from across the world and bring you an interesting conversation on the subject every week. Media advocacy is an essential skill that a PR professional must acquire to move up the ladder. This is also what will gain you more influence within the organization you work in and a seat at the table. But do you know how to create a media advocacy program? Where do you start? What issue actually warrants an advocacy program? To help us understand more about media advocacy, we have with us today Bhaskar Majumdar, Head Corporate Affairs, Communication and Digital Media, Aegis India. Bhaskar has more than 22 years of strategic communication consulting experience in the field of strategic communication, crisis communication, leadership communication and engagement, public policy, digital social media outreach, industry body engagement and brand building. He has worked with several leading Indian and global PR agencies in the country, along with managing communications for Indian corporate giants and television channels. We are very glad to have him here with us today. Hi Bhaskar, thank you for joining us today on All About PR.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks a lot for having me.
Lovely. So before we get started on the subject itself, tell us a little bit more about your journey into PR. And how did you actually arrive at selecting media advocacy as a stream that you wanted to specialize in?
So, I started in long back in 98, 99. Things were very much different those days, and now things have become very much different. So, advocacy used to be there that time also, but the nature of advocacy nowadays has become very different because of the dynamic business environment.
Okay, so for the benefit of our audience, can you first help us understand what is media advocacy?
So I see media advocacy can differ from campaign to campaign, but it involves key tools like, edit pieces, authored articles, specific third party endorsement, which can actually talk about a particular cause and create some kind of awareness and some kind of positive environment around that particular cause.
So, Bhaskar, you have been in the industry for over 2 decades. Can you trace the history of advocacy? When did the Indian PR industry and corporate India start recognizing it as a stream and wake up to the power of media advocacy? And yes, how is it perceived in India versus on a global platform? I know I've bunched a lot of questions together. Can we answer them one by one?
The advocacy campaigns were there since 98, 99, or since 95. Things
Right.
have changed because of two, three different things. One, the emergence of new media, new age media, which is social media as well as online media, that
Right.
has impacted and that has created a complete paradigm shift towards how advocacy used to happen earlier and now. And in terms of international arena, Indian advocacy campaigns nowadays are almost at par with the campaigns which is happening worldwide. Again, thanks to internet and various social media tools and others. So things have changed. Earlier, it used to be very media centric. Now it has got a lot many other aspects like connecting with RWS or state governments, but again via media.
Via media. So you are you telling me that it is still very media heavy?
No, it actually depends. See, it depends on what type of cause or what type of brand is, planning to have a advocacy campaign. Not
Right.
necessarily that, media will be the only tool. But yeah, media plays an important and critical tool because it reaches out to the masses and it can actually reach out to all the stakeholders.
Interesting. So, how does brand advocacy differ from issues advocacy versus corporate advocacy? I understand there is a differentiation between all of them. Can you shed more light on this?
Brand advocacy or issue advocacy are completely different. When there is, any company which is, planning for a brand advocacy, there is a direct link to a specific brand. An internal audience or the employees of that particular brand or the company becomes part of the campaign. Whereas issue advocacy will focus on specific issues which may or may not have direct impact on any particular brand, but
Right.
both will have different messaging, campaign ideas, time frame. So case in point, a tower issue for a telecom company is more of issue advocacy because it's not impacting any particular telecom company.
Okay.
All the telecom companies want and they have to address the tower issue because that's for the common health for the industry. So
Right.
issue advocacy will be very much different than brand advocacy. Same a Cadbury issue or a Maggie issue will be more of a brand related advocacy.
So, can you give us an example that will illustrate within a company the difference between brand issues and corporate advocacy? I understood from the previous examples about issues, about brand. Can you give us an example about corporate advocacy?
So I'll give you an example. I will not name the company. There is one telecom company which has seen too many people going at the top. Now, a advocacy program to reach out to the stakeholder as well as the customers that the company is in stable hand and the management is stable is something which will be more of a corporate advocacy. And the same company, when they're dealing with a tower issue, will become a issue advocacy. And the same company, when they're talking about various service offerings and other benefits which the company is offering, will become more of a brand advocacy. So, on the whole, all the three advocacy outreach programs will have a direct or indirect impact on the company and its business. But in terms of these three different things, the messaging will be a bit different. Obviously, the stakeholders or the target audience will be a bit different, and the messaging has to be customized accordingly.
Interesting. So tell me, in this year specifically, because this year seems to be a game changer for a lot of verticals within the industry, has been one for media advocacy as well? I'm assuming the answer is yes. And can you tell about a very interesting campaign that caught your eye for each of these different kinds of advocacies?
So the case in point is the government's outreach to the citizens fighting COVID. Starting Advocacy is something which I think is a very good tool to reach out to people to advocate that why you should wear mask, why you have to wash your hands. So it's a classic example which is ongoing and it's going well. I mean, it's reaching to the people. So multiple campaigns like this are going on, and I'm sure that because of COVID issue, the scenario has changed, and advocacy programs will also see a little bit of change from earlier days.
Absolutely. So coming back to your experience in this entire industry, I want to understand from you, when did you see Indian industry take media advocacy very seriously? What was that moment? Or was there an incident? Was there a particular campaign that woke everybody else up?
I think, see, as I said earlier, advocacy campaigns were always there since 1995. But I think starting from 2000, 2003, the change of business environment, international players coming into India, emergence of social media as a tool, all these factors combined, I think advocacy programs has seen a huge change, especially from the corporate sides.
So how does a company decide on what cause to advocate? Or is it always something that benefits the brand?
It's actually depends on company to company, their nature of business, the industry they are in. There may be organizations which may not have any plan for any advocacy program. And there can be organizations which may have multiple campaigns going on. The approach of a B2B company or a B2C company or even a FMCG company or a consulting house may have different requirements.
Right.
So in general, the cause, if not directly, may have an indirect impact on the business of the organization.
Okay, so let's come to PR now. So where do you see advocacy fitting into that entire PR cycle? How does it impact, or what is the impact that it creates on a PR campaign?
See, nowadays the clients' requirements are very different than earlier. Things have moved from mundane product launches to addressing issues which have direct impact on clients' business. So things have changed, and things have changed for good. I think the industry has seen a lot of changes in terms of the campaigns happening now vis-a-vis which used to happen earlier. It's more to do with the business environment.
Absolutely. So what are the changes that you've seen happening in advocacy, the approach towards advocacy this year?
See, the earlier, especially the agencies or the corporate commission department for any organization, whenever they used to plan for any kind of advocacy program, 60 to 70% focus of the campaigns used to be media. Now, depending on the nature of the business, there are multiple tools, multiple avenues one can explore, like tying up with a industry body or a pressure group or NGO, or maybe connecting with the RWS. So it depends on the nature of the business. But in 7 to 8 years back, as I said, the advocacy program purely used to be media related. Nowadays, there are different avenues and different aspects to it.
Absolutely. So social media, I'm assuming, would have kind of been a boon to the entire advocacy drive. Is that your opinion, or has it been more of a pain rather than a boon?
No. I mean, it is a huge impact. I still remember there used to be a time when there used to be a print news followed by online news of the same thing, and then there used to be a tweet. Now things have changed. Now there is a tweet, and then there is online news, and then the next day you go to get the newspaper to read. So the news travels fast. It's more of real time. So I mean, emergence of social media is another impact. Anyone and everyone is a party to your issues and problems. So they have a huge impact, and I think the impact. I mean, having social media as well as online news, which is real time, is good for the industry also.
Absolutely, I completely agree. So, when, let's say, a PR professional wants to get started in advocacy, how does one get started in it?
See, first of all, it's not a very easy job. It takes time to understand and get results. First of all, anyone who wants to get into any advocacy program, one has to keep in mind that you need a
Right.
lot of time to understand, formulate, and also to get results. There is a lot of time. Second,
Okay.
clarity of thought, understanding of the subject matter, continuous reading, maybe general newspaper, case study, pieces, networking. These all help. These all help.
Okay. So if you move into the corporate communication team, where does advocacy fit in? Is it included in the department? Is it a separate function, or is it just entrusted to one team member?
So it actually depends company to company, the nature of business, end customer, product and services. If the company is a B2B company or a B2C company, they may have different structures. Indian MNCs or international MNCs may have different requirements, which generally decides the team structure. But if you ask me, in ideal situation, it should be part of the corporate requirement, as most of the time the tools or messaging they are almost similar or overlapping. But yeah, in advocacy you need to have strong legal advice from the legal team also. As I said, depends on company to company, but if you ask me personally, should be within the corpcom team only.
That brings in an interesting question. Which one do you think is taking a lead in advocacy? Is it, and rather, who's better suited to handle it? Would it be the agency, the PR agency, or the corporate communication department?
I think both are equally important. At the end of the day, the understanding of that particular subject matter or the issue, the understanding of it with the Copcom team far better than the agency, because the agency professionals will be working on multiple brands and their focus on one particular issue or the understanding of a particular cause may take time because they're not in the thick of the business. But when it comes to the outreach, the corporate communication department is not capable of reaching out to all the stakeholders at all times. And their expertise of the PR agency or the PR professionals comes in. See, I've worked in both agency side, both corporate side. Both of them has to work hand to hand to have a greater impact. Okay, so let me rephrase that. If a PR agency has to enhance its advocacy jobs, if they want to that and make sure that they are the only people that the client reaches out to or the brand reaches out to for anything to do with advocacy, what is it that they need to include in their team to be able to do that and not use outreach platform? See, first they need to have certain people who have got very good understanding of policy issues, understanding of bureaucracy, how central government or state government works. Multiple things has to be built in house, because reaching out to the stakeholders is a tool which it's not an easy job, but still it can be managed. Understanding the subject matter and advising the client on critical issues is something which the client will actually look rather than the execution part. For execution, I think there are multiple agencies which are there. But if some specific agency has to, champion on the cause of advocacy, I think understanding of the subject matter is something which is very, very. And like you mentioned, understanding of the subject matter can only be done by accumulating information through various mediums to be able to do that, right? To start with, yes. But in due course of time, when a particular agency has handled multiple advocacy programs, then solutions or the understanding comes very easily and naturally, because we are already networked in the fraternity, and you always have multiple case studies to refer to, which are your own. So to start with, obviously yes, but in due course of time, it becomes much easier to understand a subject matter and formulate some kind of campaign ideas. Absolutely. So, take us through the nuts and bolts of it. How does a brand get started on advocacy? Right from figuring out how to identify a cause or an issue that they would like to support, so that ultimately, I believe all of this has to tie in back to their brand reputation, right? So how does it get started on advocacy? See, it depends on the organization. If it's a B2B company or a B2C company, or if it's a FMCG company, they have multiple issues which have a direct or indirect impact to their businesses. So when it comes to organization, identifying those issues, identification of the key stakeholders which are critical to the company, and the core messaging are the three things the organization has to think of. Once that is done, then I think the most important part is creating the right team. When I say right team, it's a combination of the corporate communication team as well as the agency. And then one can have multiple interactions, multiple discussions, multiple meetings to formulate what kind of campaign idea should be there, how to reach out to each stakeholders, how the core messaging has to be customized to suit different stakeholders, what kind of time frame should be there for campaigns, and finally what kind of desired outcome one is looking for. Setting desired outcomes, that's an interesting point that you mentioned out there. Setting desired outcomes is very essential. So in a media advocacy program, how does one define the measurement metrics? See, this is a question which has been asked for the last 20 years and no one has got any specific answer to it. Okay. But yeah, but when you see that, one is that you're pursuing certain journalists to write edit pieces or write taking authored articles, or maybe getting third party, endorsement for a particular cause. But when you see that the publication houses or the media houses are doing the same thing, getting edit pieces or author articles without your intervention is something, then you realize that we've been able to showcase a particular cause which the media houses or the journalists are easily and naturally taking it forward. So that is one benchmark one can think of. Second, if those news articles have an impact on bureaucrats or any policy related issue, then again, it can be the second way of understanding if the campaign thought of the media advocacy is going well. But apart from this, to verify number of articles or kind of articles, the easy way to understand if the campaign is successful or not. On ground, maybe one can get 100 articles, but if the cause is still there and people are not aligning to the particular cause, then I think complete campaign gets lost.
Both are very valid ways of judging the success of a particular campaign. But what is your preferred method of figuring out whether a campaign has been successful or not?
See, to be very frank, once anyone is planning for any particular campaign, there are core messaging, there are customized messaging to suits each stakeholder.
Right.
And if any article or any edit piece or any panel discussion or any webinar is capturing at least 40 to 50% of my key messaging, I think my campaign has got that boost or that it's getting noticed. Now, how it's going to impact largely on the campaign and outcome will be perfectly all right is something one can discuss on. But I think if the messaging is getting covered by various media houses in a proper way, and as I said, 60 to 70% of the messaging is there, then I think a little bit of success is already there, and then one can think of that what one has to change in due course of time. See, I'll tell you what. Unfortunately for COVID, a lot of newspapers they reduced their pages. And few newspapers decided that they will not have their edit pages, and they will be taking a very limited number of authored articles. Now, when the outlets are less, then
Right.
the possibility of getting your voice or getting your campaign focus in various media outlets become much more difficult.
So, this year has been really harsh on the media industry with a lot of print publications going bust, going online, merging supplements, and not to mention the journalists, with layoffs being the norm and the job security pretty much a dream right now. I'm sure it has impacted how you plan out a media advocacy program as well. So tell me, how has it impacted the media advocacy vertical, especially since media is a crucial part of it?
But on the other hand, the emergence of online media, it has helped because getting a particular story in, say, ET online is much easier than getting it on ET print. But again, it's a mixed bag of things. In earlier time, I still remember whenever there is any particular story in any publication house which gets misquoted, there is always a rejoinder which comes the next day. Now, with online
Right.
media, it's very difficult. If there is something misinterpreted in online version, where do you get your rejoinder in? So both. The industry is seeing a huge change from print to online, and I'm sure that in another 2 to 3 years of time, online will be much bigger than print. But one cannot ignore print media at all. So it's a mixed bag of things.
Understood. So, but has there been a change in orientation for professionals running media advocacy program? Has there been any fundamental orientation change?
See, 5 to 6 years back, whenever there was to be any campaign idea or any campaign thought, social media was not the prominent tool one used to use. Now, I think whenever there is any thought for any campaign idea, social media comes first, then other mediums which have been explored. Earlier,
Right.
getting a hoarding or a Bashtu shelter or getting a message in radio or a print ad or maybe a edit piece or maybe a panel discussion was much more important when it comes to advocacy. But with COVID, with emergence of social media and real-time news, I think things have changed. Now, social media gets prominent importance in tools which are generally used by any advocacy program.
Absolutely. It has been a game changer for a lot of people within the industry as well. Can you help our audiences with a couple of examples of media advocacy programs that you have run and that have had huge impact on the brand that you were working for?
Okay, so I'll not be taking name of the brand, but in year
That's all right.
2001 to 2000, in year 2001 2003, I was managing a brand which is into CNG buses, and that was the time when Delhi government decided that they will have CNG buses because of the pollution level in Delhi. But
Right.
unfortunately, there were some technical defects, and a few of the buses they broke down while commute, or there were certain fire issues with the CNG buses. So the company as well as the state government thought of activating some kind of advocacy program which will do more to create awareness of the pollution level and the need for CNG buses, and CNG being the safe and clean fuel compared to say diesel or petrol. Now while I know the campaign was going on promoting these causes, meanwhile the company and their subsidiaries, they changed technical aspects of the vehicle, and after the first 3 months the second quarter was more on focusing on the safety features of the bus. So that is one campaign I have worked on. Second, I was working for a industry body which was trying to promote vehicular pollution is not the only pollution which is causing pollution in Delhi. There are a lot of other aspects, a lot of other industries which are party to it, and promoting that the vehicular pollution is just minuscule part of the entire pollution chain.
It must have been a really tough one. I remember the CNG buses one, but the second one, which you're talking about, vehicular pollution, that must have been a very tough one to do, because I'm sure you faced a lot of resistance from media not wanting to admit to this.
I mean, there was different section of media which agreeing to the fact. There was different set of media which are not agreeing to the fact, and it's always easier to blame a brand rather than getting into the root cause of a particular issue. But yeah, I mean, as I said, there was a third-party research which was done along with the state government, which showed that a very minuscule part of vehicle pollution is there in terms of the chain of other pollutants. So when once you have ready-made data in hand, and obviously the government is also endorsing it, it becomes easier than earlier when people used to always blame the big brands as cause for pollution.
Interesting. And the third example you were mentioning?
I'm talking about the telecom tower. There has always been this safety hazard or safety thought about from the citizens that telecom towers are not good for health. Now, fortunately, unfortunately, with COVID situation, everyone has to depend on internet. My son who is studying in school, with me who is doing virtual meetings. So the importance of internet and the importance of telecom tower has come across something which you cannot ignore. The advocacy program to reach out to say RWAs or pressure groups, to make them understand that there is kind of a necessity evil and this cannot be ignored unless you don't want to, in a scenario where you don't want to have real-time news or need real-time help on your work, it will become very difficult. So that is another advocacy program which I work.
Interesting. So while we learn a lot from success, we also learn, I think, more from failures. Can you tell us about a couple of media advocacy fails that have happened in your career?
So I'll not get into much into details of that, but I was just working on one particular program which was trying to promote diesel being the safest fuel. The issue was that there was no specific data or convincing data to prove that. Because of lack of good data which proves that issue is good cause, or not getting too many third-party people who were ready to endorse it. These are the issues which I faced while implementing one particular campaign.
Okay. Your top 3 challenges in the field that you faced?
From the agency side, I think creating core messaging or identifying right stakeholder is still something one can work on. Thinking of good campaign ideas is something generally, I'm not talking about agency on the whole, but maybe I was struggling a bit whenever there was any kind of campaign which has been thought. So core messaging or identifying right audience, getting the right tools in, or planning for what kind of desired outcome we can have are things which are much more easier than thinking of specific campaign ideas, reaching out to specific stakeholders. That is something which I think everyone struggles on.
Right. And how does this differ when you move to the corporate side?
From the corporate side, there are already multiple programs or campaigns which are going on. It's very easy to dovetail and connect and reconnect with different programs which are already going on. And I think the hurdle for the agency side is also because of one thing, that they don't understand or they are not been given proper information that what are the campaigns or what are the previous campaigns the company has already implemented. It becomes much more easier for the Corpcom guy because he's sitting with a mine of information for the last 10 years. So it's easier for him to connect with different causes. So for him, thinking of a particular campaign will be much more easier if he takes reference to various other campaigns which the marketing guys are doing or the sales guys are doing or the HR guys are doing, and then connecting one already on ground campaign which is going on with a new campaign.
Absolutely. I'm assuming just by the virtue of being there and being a part of the system for quite some time, he or she might have more information as compared to the agency person. Completely agree.
Also to add, the Corpcom guy has been privileged to meet up with the senior management of the company. So the thought process of the senior management of any particular company comes very handy when you're thinking of core messaging or thinking of any campaign idea. Unfortunately for the agency side, they don't get too more, audience of the senior management of a company on a regular basis.
Absolutely. I think if more senior management is involved and they share inputs and insights with the PR team will just get better and better at it. It would just make it a much more fruitful association and a happier one at that. On that note, can you share with us your top three career learnings?
So, getting the perfect messaging or co-messaging or maybe identifying the right target audience or the time frame is much more easier in terms of, planning and getting it done. But when it comes to implementation, especially interacting with the other stakeholders rather than media, there are a lot of hurdles, lot of new issues which comes over for a corporate communication professional or for the agency professional. Reaching out to the media to convince them on a particular edit piece or maybe a authored article or to carry a third party endorsement is still easier to do. But when it comes to interacting with a RWA, creating a paper for the RW to make them understand for a particular cause, which will be very different than writing a edit piece or a authored article or even a press release. The language has to be simple. There has to be a connect. That paper has to have some kind of connect with that particular RW and the people staying over there. So these are things which becomes much more challenging on ground, which people cannot foresee when they are actually planning for the campaigns. So coming from my experience of last 22 years, there are a lot of campaigns or advocacy campaigns I've worked on. Most of them have been successful, few of them not been that much successful. But a few things which I've learned, at certain times you have to work on certain causes or certain advocacy programs which as a person you may not relate to or you may not agree with. But being a professional on the field and as PR professionals or corporate communication professionals are professions like lawyers. So once you've taken a client or you've taken a particular cause, you have to work on it whether you agree to that particular subject matter or not. So this is something which I mean in multiple cases I have personally figured it out that I may not be convinced myself that I'm doing the right campaign to project or create awareness about one particular cause. But being a professional, as I said earlier, one has to get it done and one has to get it done with utmost care and sincerity. So being a professional, there's times when you are on that edge of the shore that it's about your values or the client's benefit. But as I said, as a professional, work has to go on. So these are the challenges I have faced multiple times, but somehow I have managed it.
Okay. But that's an interesting point that you bring up. While in PR, you have to be very mindful about what you're projecting and who you're representing, the tussle between the inner self and the outer world is a very real one. And I'm sure many professionals struggle with it. But in media advocacy, the stakes are even higher. Personally, I believe that you should align yourself to causes you believe in and can be passionate about. That is what media and the audiences at large resonate with. But I would like you to answer, how do you balance self and profession?
I think it's a professional call. I mean, fortunately, unfortunately, we're in a profession where you have to end up managing multiple issues you may agree or you may not agree with. As I said, as I gave you an example of lawyers, it's pure being professional. I mean, when I'm working for a particular campaign or advocacy campaign for any particular client or maybe for my own company, one has to rest aside those prejudices and one has to think about the success of the campaign. I mean, one can always talk about it later on at a different platform altogether. But when you are being a professional and managing one particular thing, one has to be very particular about the success of that particular campaign.
I think it's a very deep rooted dilemma that all of us always struggle with.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. There are a lot of agencies which has taken this decision of not working for any alcohol company or tobacco company or any meat processing company.
Right.
So I think there is a good start about from the agency side of not getting into things which they have to manage and they will not be very happy about it. So things may change. It's a personal choice and it's a professional choice for everyone, every professional, every agency to take.
Parting shots.
I think reading and learning is something which will always help you immensely.
It's the absolute basics.
Yeah, it's the absolute basic and it is I think it is a start and end of every campaign. If you don't read, if you don't keep on learning, the campaign may get loses focus in the middle of the campaign. On second, reading edit pieces, author articles, case studies which are successful case studies play a very critical role in understanding different subject matter. Like I think Hindu publishes this book which contains entire years of edit pieces in one book. They have got I think 3 to 4 volumes. If someone is seriously into advocacy programs and get into seriously into various campaigns, I think these books from Hindu is good read because they talk about multiple different causes, multiple thought processes, starting from bureaucracy to academia to consulting houses to NGOs to RWS. See, at the end of the day, for any campaign, as I said earlier, creating a core message or identifying the right audience, identifying the right time frame is still something which one can work on. But when it comes to campaign ideas, which is very specific to those campaigns, is something one has to think of. Now, for those campaign ideas, it's preferred that one has to read case studies of the edit cases or the Hindu book I talked about. This actually helps. And also critical thinking, that is also important.
Brilliant. I am definitely going to pick up this book from the Hindu.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bhaskar. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was lovely.
Thanks a lot.
On the podcast.
Pleasure.
So that was Bhaskar Majumdar giving us an insight into media advocacy. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did. I know I learned a lot. Would like to give a shout out to the good folks at PRPOI. This episode was brought to you via a special arrangement with them. Thank you again for tuning in today, and we will see you next week for another interesting conversation from the world of communication.